Hey friends, welcome back to the kitchen. So today is a cold and wet day, so I decided that I'm going to take this large Napa cabbage that my in-laws gifted us before it was like 10 degrees, and I'm going to make kimchi. So I've got our fire cider here to show you the progress. So I added the turmeric. You can see that it is becoming, as you shake it, you're supposed to shake it every day. I never remember to do that. And I don't like to shake it because turmeric stains. So I don't really want that on me, staining me. So I kind of like just move it around. And the turmeric was added last because, I couldn't find it, of course, when I wanted to make it. I found it after the fact, which I said I was going to happen. So it's starting to disperse down. The turmeric is what gives fire cider its color. And so I just wanted to show you the progress of that. So I keep it in the dark corner of my kitchen. And then this is the vanilla extract that we started in November. And so I'm going to keep this going still, but you could see the vodka is now a nice brown color. I've got a sterilized rock in here that is keeping the vanilla beans weighed down. And I'm going to keep this here for probably another month or two. The fire cider takes 6 weeks on average. The vanilla extract, I think, is 3 months to 4 months. Anyway, today we're going to do kimchi. So you can see I've got like a hodgepodge of things going on here. So I made dog food this weekend. So I I went through the winter squash that I had to see if anything was going bad. Unfortunately, one of our cucuzzis did go bad. And the cucuzzis are the really long Italian squashes. But what I found is when you try to make that a winter squash, it doesn't have a lot of meat to it. And what was happening was when I was cutting it up is actually the seeds were sprouting in the squash because the squash doesn't want to be eaten, it wants to grow, right? So it was decomposing because it wanted to grow. It wanted these seeds to become plants. So that was not what I saved it for because I wanted to save it for food. So it took a while to process the other one. I had canned some of them in the fall, and I couldn't. Downstairs is a mess. My husband is doing a project, so I couldn't find what I had canned. So I thought, let me just cut this up and process it and use it in dog food. So this is the seeds from that kukuzzi. This is only half of the seeds from one of them. So you could see the seeds are expensive to buy, but once you grow it, this is probably, 10 packages of what they would sell you for the organic kukuzzi squash. And these seeds are from a Cinderella pumpkin that I was gifted, and because I don't grow Cinderella pumpkin, I didn't have the seeds, so I decided to save the seeds. And it has a very distinct taste, so I did put some in dog food, but I did freeze some of it for us. So today, moving on to kimchi. So I've got some organic ginger I took out of the freezer to thaw. I've got an onion because I forgot to pick up scallions. So again, fermenting can be a kitchen sink recipe, just like fire cider. So you use what you have, right? And I'm going to use my food processor because I don't want to have my eyes bleed today with processing hot peppers or onions, right? So I'm going to use some garlic. I've got the end of a head here. I've got an onion that is starting to sprout, so I want to use this up. I picked up some organic radishes I'm going to use. I've got some hot peppers I had in the freezer. I've got some carrots here I'm going to use up. And then I've got that big Napa cabbage. So fermenting is really easy. You can either do it 2 ways. You can make a brine, which is what I did here. So I filled up a quart jar with purified water. This is not tap water. This is water that went through the Berkey. I added 2 tablespoons of pink salt to it. I let it mix up, right? I'm going to shake it up. And then this will be poured over the kimchi once we stuff it into these jars. So I am using glass jars with metal tops because I don't have any mason jars left right now that I haven't run through the dishwasher, and these jars are clean. I've just got them out of the dishwasher. So again, we're going to use what we have, right? You're not going to drive yourself crazy trying to get all the right things. I don't use weights. I sterilize rocks. Or you could save the outside of the Napa cabbage because they're large and use those to keep your vegetables down, because any vegetables that are not in the brine run the risk of growing moldy. So again, I'm going to turn the food processor on while I do this without you guys having to hear it, because I don't have a fancy schmancy one that does not make a lot of noise. Mine makes a lot of noise. So I'm going to process our onion. I've got, 3-4 cloves of garlic. I'm going to throw some radishes in, some carrots, and the hot pepper, and then I'm going to process the cabbage after. So stay tuned. Okay, so we're back. So I've now processed 2 of these hot peppers, I guess what would be 4 or 5 carrots, a small onion. I processed 6 of the radishes. So you could also cut this on a cutting board with a knife. I choose not to, 1, because I have a food processor and it's faster, and 2, because the smells really bother me. So I try to make it the least of an obstacle, right? Try to make it as easy as possible. So as I was talking about before, there are 2 ways you can process this. So I did make a brine beforehand, right? This is going to be enough for 2 quarts. I'm probably going to have to still add water. The other way you could do it is if I process the cabbage first, which I'll show you after I empty this into the jars, is that you can massage the cabbage with 2 tablespoons of salt, depending how much cabbage you cut up, and it will make its own brine. So like you leave it in a stainless steel container or a glass bowl. You could do glass because it won't rust. I do stainless steel because it's easier to clean and it's not so heavy. And as the salt begins to break down the cabbage, it creates a liquid and it creates its own brine. So that's typically how I make sauerkraut. But for kimchi, this is my first time doing it in a really long time. So I'm going to make the brine. Just because Napa cabbage I think it's going to be harder to break down. I don't know. Maybe it will be easier. I don't know. I'm going to do a combination and see what works. Again, you do what's best for you. This is, it's plain. There's no way that you have to do it. There's no right or wrong, right? It is a science. You want to have enough salt because the salt is what keeps bad bacteria from growing so that you don't have mold. If you don't have enough salt, mold will grow. If your brine is not covering all of your vegetables, mold will grow. You want to keep this away from other ferments, right? So I'm not going to keep this next to my fire starter. I'm going to move it to the other side of the kitchen where it's dark. But I want to keep an eye on it because I want to make sure 1, mold's not growing, and 2, I want to keep, you could taste it, you could smell it, all right? So I've been fermenting for, 8, 9 years. So I know what it's supposed to smell like and what it's not supposed to smell like. But if you've never fermented before, you might not know what it's supposed to smell like. I mean, if you've bought real fermented food, you know what it's supposed to smell like, but it's always like a learning curve when you're making it yourself. So right now I'm teaching a girlfriend how to do it, and we're just kind of playing with how many days to what it tastes good to you, right? So what tastes good to me may not taste good to you. Maybe you want it more fermented. Maybe you want it less fermented. It will still ferment in the fridge, right? Fermented food lasts about a year in the fridge. But it will ferment at a very, very slow pace. But it will still ferment. So it's based upon personal preference, right? Like I'm not going to tell you it has to be 7 days, it has to be 10 days, it has to be 5 days. What I have found through experience is that the warmer your kitchen is, the faster things are going to ferment. So in the summertime, my stuff ferments really fast, right? Even though we run air conditioning, it's so hot and it ferments faster, and food will go bad quicker when it's warm, and it will stay fresher when it's cold, right? So it's kind of like thinking about it logically like that. So it's winter time. My house is not as warm as it would be in the summertime. It's about 69 degrees in my house. So it's going to ferment a little bit slower. And because I haven't made kimchi in a really, really long time, I mean, I mostly make dilly beans, kraut, curtido, and pickles. And then I make coconut kefir, I make coconut milk kefir. I did the gluten-free sourdough, which didn't really agree with me, so we don't do it as much anymore. But I typically have tried, when I first started fermenting, I tried like all different things. I fermented watermelon rind. I fermented whole cherry tomatoes, which people liked. I did that again this year. I fermented, like an anti-inflammatory kraut, which was really good. It had pineapple, turmeric, cabbage. I don't remember what else was in it. I'd have to look through my notes. But that was really good. I fermented beets. I still don't like beets. So, like, ferment things you like to eat, just like we say grow. the food you like to eat. It's the same thing with fermenting. So the reason I'm making this is because the fire cider is going to take 6 weeks to make, and I know some people who are struggling with some respiratory issues. So because this has hot peppers in it, it has the onions, it has the garlic, and it's fermented, it's going to have great beneficial bacteria. So I'm going to give them some of this until the fire cider is ready. So, and I had this big Napa cabbage, and I was like, what am I going to do with that? It's so big. We don't like stuffed cabbage. And again, quick and easy is my thing, right? So I was like, well, I can make kimchi, and this would help these people that aren't feeling good. They could eat the kimchi, they could drink the juice, and then I could stir fry the rest of it, right? So I'm probably only going to use half of that big head. So I'm gonna show you basically carefully how we're gonna start. And so if you have any cuts on your hands, like so I have a cut, I made sure to cover it with a Band-Aid because this will burn, and it's already very potent. I smell it. So you want to be really careful, and also you want to have sterile jars because we don't want any bad bacteria to grow in here because that will create mold. So I'm going to take this off. I'm going to get a utensil. So people say don't use metal when you're fermenting. Listen, just use what you have, right? So like there's a lot of rules for everything, but you know, I use this metal funnel because I don't like to use plastic, and I'm not going to use plastic. Yeah, this is really potent. So this has the ginger in it. So it had 2 knobs of ginger. We've got our onions, our carrots. I put 2 hot peppers in here. I don't know what type they were. They were not jalapeno. I did not grow them. They were in my produce box, and I keep them in the freezer for fire cider. You know, and these sorts. Sorry, already getting to me. These sorts of recipes. So I'm just going to, that doesn't really get broken up that well. Add it to the bottom. Ideally, this would all be mixed together with the cabbage. My food processor is not that big, so I cannot do that. I have to do everything in batches. Again, if you were cutting it all together, you could add it all to a bowl. You could mix it. Again, I'm trying not to touch it because I don't want to have a reaction. I've played that game one too many times, and I have learned my lesson. So I don't play that game anymore. Okay, so you could see here, I know it's a little off camera, but just trying to keep it so you guys can see. So I've added, right, I have a small kitchen, so we gotta make do. So I've added some to each of the bottom of these, right? So I'm gonna pause you again. Come back after these messages from our sponsors, and I'm going to process the cabbage, so just bear with me. Okay, so we're back. So this is actually a little bit finer than I wanted it. Normally I would just cut it myself, but I just kind of feeling a little lazy today, and I want to make my life easier. So people might actually like this better because it is finer. When I can usually cut it, it's a lot thicker. But I have to say, whoever, my in-laws got this Napa cabbage from a neighbor, and literally whoever grew this, I don't know what they did, but there was no pest damage in this cabbage. And I do not have lots of success with growing cabbage. We've tried to grow cabbage, I don't even know how many times. And cabbage worms, we cannot get rid of them. This year I did grow with homeopathy, which I did videos about in the summertime. That did help, but geez, man, like we got some heads of cabbage this year, but they were really small because the weather was weird. Surprise, surprise. And we still had pest issues. So I don't know, these people must be experts at growing cabbage because literally, I mean, nothing. There's no pest damage at all. And normally that would freak me out because of pesticide issues, but my father-in-law said that these people don't use pesticides, and because pesticides were really expensive to get this year, plus cabbage is not one of those dirty dozen crops, so the pesticide doesn't really stick to it. Even like when we use the BT for the worms, it doesn't really stick. So I'm gonna keep processing this cabbage until I fill up my containers, and I'm gonna bring it back to show you the brine. Okay, so we're back. I've got my handy dandy tamper. So this thing is great. I use this when I make kraut. You wouldn't want to use this on pickles or dilly beans because you would actually crush them and that would not be good. But kraut, you want to tamp it down. So you want to make sure that it's really, one, because you could fit more produce in there, right? But like, you also don't want air bubbles. And you want it packed so that there is not vegetables floating, because that can cause mold. So because mold is an issue that I contend with, I live on an island, it is moldy all of the time. I try to do anything I can to not introduce more mold into my environment or into my body. So we always have a dehumidifier running. We remediate constantly, and it's just, you know, I take binders, all those things, right? So mold is no go. It's no good. You only want the good, beneficial bacteria. You do not want bad bacteria, which would be mold. So we're going to take our brine that we created, 2 tablespoons pink salt. You could also use Celtic salt. Do not use iodized salt. That is bad. Don't use that for anything. But you could use pink salt, Redmond's. You could use Celtic sea salt, right? Either of those work. So all I'm going to do, you know, first I should actually add my weight. But you can see it's bubbling up. So it's getting rid of the air bubbles. Getting my weights. Sterilized rocks. I live on the North Shore of Long Island. That's all we have. Lots of rocks. So I'm going to use them, whichever ones fit, right? Putting them in my jars. I need one more. These also actually like beneficial minerals, right? From the earth. We love Mother Nature. So I'm going to add to this. So again, you want to cover your vegetables so you can hear it. So I'm going to need to make more brine. Again, I could have made my own brine by using a bowl, shredding my cabbage, and adding salt to it. I did not do that today. I wanted a quick and easy method. That's what we're doing. So I'm going to add more to this. So we've got 3 down. And again, you could use airlock tops. I'm going to have to add more salt. You could, actually I have salt left in this. You could use airlock tops. So I use the airlock tops in the summertime. In the wintertime, I typically don't need to do that. And because these are not wide mouth jars, my airlock tops will not fit them. So I'm just going to top off each of the containers, right? Because again, the salt is what keeps mold from growing. Just a little bit of salt left in here. So I want to use warm water. So my water is not warm. It is room temperature, so not all of my salt fully incorporated. But so you don't want to fill this too high, right? The reason being, as it ferments, the water levels are going to bubble up. So that is why you need to keep an eye on it. You might want to put it on a plate, which I probably will do, because I've had it where it has risen and made a mess. So, food for thought. Again, you get to choose. So I'm going to loosely put the tops on. Again, I'm using metal tops. This is what I have. Normally I would use plastic. You could put parchment paper. You could put a piece of paper towel and cut it underneath. I might do that. The reason you want the tops on loosely is the gas needs to escape, 1. 2, they need to be covered so that bad bacteria does not get in it. Dust does not get into it. Dust mites, whatever, things that go bump in the night, whatever it may be. So you want it to be covered. So I'm going to, again, wintertime, I can do this and I don't have an issue with mold. But I've been fermenting for 9 years, so I know exactly what to do and what not to do. So if you've never fermented before, use use the airlock tops. The mason tops, the airlock tops. You can get them anywhere, fermenting sets are sold. Try to support a small business. I bought from Farm Curious 9 years ago when I started. I don't know if they're still around. But I've tried different airlock tops. They all work pretty well. But they're on wide mouth jars. And I didn't have any wide mouth washed, right? So again, we use what we have. So I'm using these mason jars that were gifted to me. They are regular mouth. And because they're being fermented in and not canned in, they work. And this is what it will be. So that's it. We just made kimchi today. I'm going to keep an eye on this. I'm going to keep this in a dark part of my kitchen away from my other ferments. But I'm going to keep an eye on it. And again, I could have incorporated this a little bit better. You can see that the carrot, medley, radish mixture is at the bottom. Ideally, you would want it all mixed together. Does it make it any better? No. Does it make it worse or better? No, it doesn't, right? It's, again, what works for you. I was making it easier on myself today, and my food processor does not fit everything in it. I could have done it in steps and mixed it all together, but I didn't want the acids from the peppers to bother me. So that was what I chose. So freedom to choose what's best for you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe. See you soon.